The stars flickered in the distance, distant and indifferent to the impending storm. Earth had always been considered a small, insignificant speck in the vastness of the galaxy, a place where the noise of galactic politics and interstellar wars never reached. To the rest of the universe, humanity was a primitive species, struggling to catch up with the technology and sophistication of their neighbors. There had been no reason for the powerful empires of the galaxy to pay much attention to Earth. Humanity was seen as a curiosity at best, a backwater planet with a dying civilization at worst. That was until the Crixian hegemony arrived. The Crixians were a race of warlords, their culture and society built on conquest and domination. With their dark blue skin and towering frames, they had crushed 17 systems, each one falling to their overwhelming military might. Their ships, sleek and terrifying, were equipped with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. They wielded weapons capable of vaporizing entire cities with a single strike, and their shields were impervious to anything humanity could throw at them. War leader Drax, the supreme commander of the Crixian fleet, had long since made a name for himself as one of the deadliest beings in the galaxy. His name was whispered with dread in the halls of conquered worlds, and his fleet was the harbinger of annihilation. When the Crixian fleet turned its gaze toward Earth, there was no question about what was coming next. Earth's defenses, modest at best, were no match for the Crixian war machine. Drax's arrival was not subtle. His fleet appeared in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud descending on a bright world. The skies, once peaceful and serene, were now filled with the shadows of colossal Crixian warships. Their presence blocked out the stars, casting an ominous pall over the planet, and as the ships moved into position, the Crixians made their first move. A broadcast. The entire planet watched as the screen flickered to life. War leader Drax stood in front of a massive holographic projection of his fleet, towering over the human audience. His cold, alien eyes scanned the crowd as he spoke. "People of Earth," Drax's voice boomed, echoing through the broadcast with a menacing calm, "you have long been hidden in the shadow of your own ignorance, cowering in your corner of the galaxy, insignificant and unworthy of notice. But now, your time has come. We, the Crixian hegemony, have claimed 17 systems, and we will not stop until your world falls as well." His words hung in the air, a chilling promise. His lips curled into a smile, one filled with arrogance, as if the entire galaxy were his to take. The hologram shifted, showing footage of Earth's most advanced military weaponry. A handful of human warships, each one equipped with projectiles and energy shields. The Crixians watched them with clinical detachment. "Primitive weapons," Drax sneered. "These are your greatest defense? Laughable. Your ships cannot withstand the might of the Crixian fleet. Your shields are paper-thin. Your weapons are toys." The screen shifted again to a live feed of Earth's capital cities, the Crixian ships looming overhead, their weapons primed for destruction. "We will not waste time with your defenses," Drax continued, his voice like ice. "We shall obliterate your cities, dismantle your military, and leave your species to be forgotten by the cosmos. And there is nothing you can do to stop it." The broadcast ended with a final warning. "We give you 24 hours to surrender. After that, your extinction will begin." Across the globe, humanity stood in stunned silence. Fear swept through every city, every country. The Crixians were real. Their threat was not a joke or an empty boast. Earth was facing a power it could not comprehend, a force far beyond anything it had ever encountered. The Crixians had shown no mercy in the past, and now, it seemed, humanity was to be their next victim. In the command center of Earth's military, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Military officials scrambled to assess their situation, working frantically to prepare a counterattack, but their efforts were futile. The Crixians had proven their superiority in every way. Their fleet was already in orbit, and humanity had no means of stopping them. Among the military personnel watching the broadcast was Major Torren Vask. a seasoned veteran of Earth's special forces. Vask had fought in countless skirmishes, each one testing his strength, his resolve, and his ability to think on his feet. His cybernetic enhancements, designed for speed, accuracy, and survival, had earned him a reputation as one of Earth's most respected officers. But now, as the broadcast concluded and the full weight of the situation sank in, Vask felt something he hadn't experienced in years: frustration. The Crixians were right, in one sense. Earth's technology was no match for theirs. But Vask's mind was already working. The Crixians had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back. They assumed that their advanced weaponry would be enough to crush Earth's defenses without a second thought. What they didn't understand was that humanity had something they lacked: ingenuity. Vask stood up from his seat, his eyes fixed on the flickering images of the Crixian fleet. His mind raced as he analyzed the broadcast, looking for any weaknesses, any signs that the Crixians weren't as invulnerable as they seemed. And then it came to him. Subtle but undeniable. The Crixian warships, despite their overwhelming strength, had a vulnerability. Their shields, though powerful, weren't perfect. Vask had noticed a brief, almost imperceptible fluctuation in their shield systems as they diverted power to their gravity drives. It was a momentary weakness, one that could be exploited. "They're not invincible," Vask muttered to himself. "Just arrogant." He turned to his team, his voice low but filled with purpose. "We've got one shot at this. If we can exploit that weakness, we might just have a chance." His team, veterans of various operations, nodded in agreement. They trusted Vask, and he trusted them. They weren't going to give up. Not without a fight. Earth might have been caught off guard, but they weren't going to lay down and let the Crixians destroy everything they'd built. The Crixians had underestimated humanity, and that was going to be their downfall. The plan would not be easy, and the risks were enormous. But Vask knew one thing for sure: Earth had no choice but to fight back, and fight back hard. As the Crixian fleet loomed above Earth, humanity's fate was no longer in the hands of the powerful warlords from the stars. It was in the hands of Major Torren Vask, and he was ready to rewrite the rules of the game. The first wave of the Crixian assault hit Earth with the ferocity of a storm. The Crixian fleet, massive and indomitable, descended on the planet with overwhelming force. Their warships, sleek and imposing, seemed to blot out the sky as they moved into position above Earth's major cities. Each ship was a floating fortress, shielded by technology centuries ahead of humanity's own capabilities. Earth's military was simply not prepared for the scale of the attack. Despite their best efforts, humanity's defense systems proved inadequate, and the first shots were fired. Crixian weapons tore through Earth's fleets, disintegrating ships with ease. Their energy weapons effortlessly cut through human shields, turning Earth's most advanced warships into scrap metal within minutes. The Crixians were not interested in subtlety. They arrived with the intent to destroy, their firepower unmatched by anything Earth had at its disposal. Their brutal efficiency shattered Earth's defensive lines, and within hours major cities were under attack. Humanity had never faced such a force. The Crixians didn't care for diplomacy or negotiation. They had come to conquer, and their message was clear: resistance was futile. In the midst of this destruction, Major Torren Vask watched the carnage unfold from the command center. The devastation was overwhelming. Earth's military forces were scattered, and the enemy was relentless, moving with the precision of a predator hunting its prey. The Crixian warships floated above Earth, their shields impervious to human weapons. The few human warships that had managed to scramble were being picked apart one by one. The situation seemed hopeless, but Vask's mind refused to accept defeat. He had seen battle before, countless battles that had tested his limits, but this was different. He knew they had no time to waste. Humanity was on the brink of annihilation, and the conventional military response was too slow, too predictable. Something had to change, something unpredictable, something the Crixians hadn't accounted for. Taking a deep breath, Vask turned to his team. We're not going to beat them at their own game. We'll have to make them play by our rules. He had no illusions about the scale of their challenge. The Crixian fleet was advanced, their weapons capable of wiping entire cities off the map in seconds. But he had one advantage: humanity's adaptability. If they could turn the Crixian strengths into weaknesses, they might just have a fighting chance. Vask's first move was to take matters into his own hands. He led a series of Black Ops operations that would use Earth's limited resources in ways the Crixians couldn't anticipate. His team infiltrated Crixian-controlled areas, stealing technology and data, all while remaining off the Crixian radar. Earth's military hadn't yet figured out how to counteract the Crixian superior weaponry, but Vask had a plan. He'd already begun to reverse engineer the Crixian shielding systems they had obtained during the initial skirmishes. With these stolen systems, Vask's team began working on a way to adapt Crixian technology for human use. They fashioned energy shields that could disrupt Crixian power flows and designed weapons that used Crixian energy systems in ways the invaders hadn't predicted. Vask's team was small, but they had no choice but to move fast. They needed to strike before the Crixians could fully secure their hold on Earth. Using this new technology, Vask ordered his team to target Crixian supply lines. It was a small-scale operation compared to the massive battles unfolding, but it was their best chance to create disruption. They launched precision strikes against Crixian convoys, targeting vulnerable supply ships and infrastructure. The Crixians, accustomed to overwhelming force and direct confrontation, didn't expect such tactics from humans. They thought Earth's military would try to mount a conventional defense. Instead, Vask's team hit them where it hurt the most, logistically. In the chaos of these raids, Vask's team used frangible rounds, bullets coated with a conductive gel that disrupted Crixian energy shields. These rounds didn't pierce the shields, but the conductive gel had a peculiar effect. It forced the Crixians to wipe their shields constantly, creating a momentary weakness. The shields flickered and malfunctioned, causing confusion among the Crixian forces. The Crixians weren't used to being forced into reactive tactics. They were confident in their superior technology, and now their perfect system was showing cracks. The disruption was minor at first, small hits that seemed insignificant in the grand scope of the war, but it was enough. Crixian ships began to lose their synchronization. Their shields became unreliable, their systems more vulnerable. Earth's attacks were surgical, creating just enough chaos to make the Crixians question their certainty. But the Crixians didn't take this disruption lightly. Their response was swift and brutal. The Crixian leadership, furious at the audacity of humans, ordered retaliatory strikes that were even more vicious. Earth's soldiers, who had been captured during earlier operations, were executed in front of human cameras, a grotesque show of power meant to break the human spirit. The Crixians thought that their brutal response would crush the morale of the resistance. They didn't realize that it would have the opposite effect. Vask's team had planted tracking devices on each captured soldier before they were executed, and those devices fed Earth's resistance valuable intelligence. The Crixians, blind to the true impact of their actions, were unknowingly giving Earth all the information needed to launch further strikes. This shift marked a turning point. The Crixians, expecting humanity to collapse under the pressure, found themselves facing something they hadn't planned for: human ingenuity. The executions, meant to instill fear, had only galvanized humanity. The Crixians had thought they were showing dominance, but they had unknowingly strengthened their enemy. Vask watched the footage of the Crixian executions in silence, his jaw clenched. The Crixians had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to turn their weaknesses into strengths. As the team gathered around him, Vask turned to face them. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice cold with determination. "We've got their numbers. Now we make them pay for every inch they've taken." Humanity's resistance had begun in the shadows, unnoticed by the Crixians, but now the Crixians had awakened a force they couldn't comprehend. Vask knew that this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. The Crixians may have superior firepower, but humanity had something far more dangerous. creativity, adaptability, and the will to survive at all costs. The war had only just begun, but Earth's resistance was already shaping into something more dangerous than the Crixians had expected. Major Tauran Vask's Black Ops operations had disrupted their supply lines, and the Crixians' confidence was starting to crack. Their arrogance, once their greatest strength, was becoming their greatest weakness. Still, Earth's military was far from ready to fight a full-scale war against the Crixians, who were entrenched with superior weapons and shields. But in the shadows, Vask and his team had found something that could shift the entire course of the conflict, something the Crixians had never anticipated. The breakthrough came when Jix, Vask's tech specialist, uncovered a hidden vulnerability in the Crixian communication network. It had been hours of scanning and analysis, days of frustrating dead ends, but Jix had finally found the thread they needed to pull. "Vask!" Jix's voice crackled over the comms. "You need to see this. You won't believe it." Vask stood from his post and made his way to the tech bay. His mind had been elsewhere, calculating their next move, but the excitement in Jix's voice caught his attention. "What have you found?" Vask asked, already sensing that this could be the breakthrough they desperately needed. Jackson's fingers flew over the console, and a holographic projection of the Crixian communication system lit up the room. "I've been analyzing their command structure for days, using the tracking data we've been pulling from their captured soldiers. It's strange. The Crixian commanders are all linked together through something I hadn't recognized before, a quantum entanglement network." Vask raised an eyebrow. "Quantum entanglement? Explain." "Right. The Crixians are using quantum entanglement to keep their command units in constant communication with their ships," Jix continued. "Every Crixian commander is in real-time contact with their fleet. This is why their forces are so precise. They always know what's going on, where to strike, and how to adapt." Jix's fingers danced over the console again, pulling up a complex diagram of entangled quantum links. "Here's the thing. This system, despite how sophisticated it is, can be hijacked. If we gain access to their frequency, we could disrupt their entire chain of command. We could control their fleets like puppets." Vask's eyes widened as he studied the hologram. "You're telling me we can turn their own technology against them?" Jix nodded. "Exactly. It's a long shot, but if we can tap into their communication channels, we can make the Crixians think they're in control while we slowly cripple their fleet. And the best part? The Crixians think their system is unhackable, but it's only secure if you don't know how to break the encryption." Vask leaned back, a slow smile crossing his face. The Crixians had underestimated humanity's ingenuity. They'd assumed that their technology, once thought beyond the reach of any species, was foolproof. But now, humanity had found a crack in their armor. "Let's get to work," Vask said, turning to his team. "If Jix can hack into their systems, we strike fast and hard. We'll hit their fleet where it hurts and they won't even see it coming." The operation wasn't without its risks. If the Crixians discovered the breach, they would immediately shut down the entanglement system, leaving Earth with nothing but conventional means of attack, which were still vastly outmatched. But Vask's mind was already racing with possibilities. The Crixians might have advanced technology, but humanity had always been resourceful. They had adapted before, and they would do it again. The next few days were filled with a frenzy of activity. Jix worked tirelessly, modifying Earth's satellite arrays to intercept the Crixian quantum signals. Vask's team was in constant motion, gathering intelligence, coordinating with the remaining human resistance, and preparing for the strike. The tension was palpable. The human forces knew that this was a make-or-break moment. If they succeeded, they would have the Crixians on the run. If they failed, humanity's chances for survival would be drastically reduced. Finally, Jix's voice crackled over the comms again. "Vask, we've got it. I've cracked the encryption. The Crixians won't know what hit them." Vask's heart skipped a beat. "Are we ready to move?" "Almost," Jix replied, his voice sharp. "I've gained access to their command network. We can see every ship, every commander's location in real time. I'm sending the data to your terminal now." The data flood hit Vask's terminal with overwhelming speed. On the screen, the Crixian fleet was laid bare. Every ship, every commanding officer, all connected and transmitting in real time. The Crixians had no idea that their entire communication system was now in enemy hands. "All right," Vask said, his voice steady but urgent. "We move fast. We'll target their fleet's weak points first, hit their supply lines and create confusion. If we disrupt their communications, they'll be blind. We'll take out their key ships and leave them scrambling." Drix tapped a few final keys. "I've sent out the false signals. Their commanders won't be able to tell what's real and what's not. They'll be firing on their own fleet before they even know it." With that, Earth's forces launched their first coordinated strike. They hit the Crixian fleet with precision, exploiting the vulnerabilities in the fleet's formation that the Crixians had never anticipated. The initial success was staggering. Crixian ships began to break formation, their shields flickering, their weapons systems malfunctioning. Panic spread through their ranks as they scrambled to regain control. But the real surprise came when the Crixian fleet began to fire on its own ships. A deadly combination of false orders, jamming signals and disinformation, courtesy of Earth's hacked quantum network, sowed chaos in their ranks. The Crixians were confused, unable to communicate effectively with each other. Earth had turned their technological advantage into a weapon of disarray. The Crixians responded swiftly, but not before Earth's resistance had gained a significant edge. They began to retreat, realizing that their once immaculate coordination was slipping away, but the damage was done. The psychological effect on the Crixians was profound. The belief that they were unbeatable had been shattered, and for the first time, they were on the defensive. Vask stood at the center of the command room, watching the holographic displays flicker as the Crixian fleet fractured. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but also a nagging unease. This was only the beginning. The Crixians had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. As Vask glanced at the tracking screen, he knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But for now, Earth had shown the galaxy that it would not go down without a fight. The Crixians had opened the door, and humanity was just beginning to walk through it. With the quantum entanglement link to the Crixian command network now fully established, Major Torren Vask knew that the war had just entered a new critical phase. The knowledge gleaned from hacking into their communication system was invaluable, but it wasn't enough to simply disable a few ships or create minor disruptions. Earth's forces needed a game-changing move. One that would cripple the Crixians and send a message that humanity was no longer a helpless target. The Crixians, once so confident in their superiority, now had to be made to feel the same uncertainty humanity had experienced during the first days of the invasion. Vask spent long hours poring over the data they had gathered, running simulations of various strike scenarios. His mind raced, constantly analyzing the Crixian fleet's weaknesses. What struck him most was the Crixians' over-reliance on their communication systems. Their entire fleet was coordinated through quantum entanglement, a system designed to give them the ultimate advantage. The Crixian commanders, constantly linked to their ships and each other, were able to act with surgical precision. But that precision also made them vulnerable. If Vask could exploit their dependence on this flawless communication, it would give humanity the upper hand. The idea came to him in a flash: Operation Quantum Strike. Vask's plan was audacious, but it was the only one that stood a chance of succeeding. By using the hijacked frequencies, Earth's forces would launch a series of precisely coordinated strikes, targeting the Crixian fleet's weak points, exploiting their communications network to confuse their commanders, and turning their own technology against them. With the Crixian systems disrupted, Earth would disable key ships, targeting dreadnoughts and flagship vessels that would cripple their command structure. The Crixians wouldn't know who to trust, where to turn, or even what was real anymore. Vask gathered his team in the briefing room. Jix, the tech specialist who had cracked the Crixian communications, was already inputting the final details of the plan into the terminal. The rest of the team, veterans of various operations, stood around the table, waiting for Vask's next command. They had all been through hell already, but they trusted him completely. "This is it," Vask said, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the situation. "We've been given an opportunity, but we only have one shot at this. If we execute perfectly, we cripple their command structure. If we fail, we may never get another chance." Jix looked up from his terminal. "The Crixians are arrogant. They'll never see it coming." Vask nodded. "That's the key. Their arrogance is their weakness. They think they're invincible, that their communications and their fleets are flawless. Our job is to prove them wrong." The first phase of Operation Quantum Strike would take place during a Crixian parade, a grand event meant to celebrate the supposed victory of the Crixian fleet. It was their way of rubbing Earth's defeat in humanity's face, showing the entire galaxy that they were, in fact, the dominant species. The Crixians were blissfully unaware that the parade would become the perfect opportunity to strike. With most of their fleet in close formation, celebrating their victory, Earth's forces would have a chance to strike at their weak points, precisely targeting the dreadnoughts that served as the backbone of the Crixian fleet. The moment the parade began, Earth's forces would launch a synchronized assault. Every strike would be guided by the hijacked Crixian frequencies, creating confusion among their ranks. The human forces would target their shields, their weapons, and their engines, hitting vulnerable points with pinpoint accuracy. The Crixians, expecting nothing more than a display of their superiority, would be blindsided. Vask took one last look at the map. "Jix, sync our frequencies with their command network. Once we make our first strike, there's no turning back. We need to disable their communications completely." Zix's fingers danced over the console. "It's ready. Once we begin the hack, we'll be able to reroute their entire fleet's communications." "Good," Vask said, steeling himself for what was to come. "Let's make it count." The operation unfolded with frightening speed. As the Crixian parade began, Earth's fleet positioned itself for the attack. Vask's team, using the Crixians' own communication network, initiated the first wave. The initial strike hit hard, targeting the shields of the Crixian ships. The Crixians' dreadnoughts, their pride and joy, faltered. The shields flickered and sputtered as their energy reserves were overloaded. For a brief moment, chaos reigned on the Crixian side. Vask watched as the Crixian ships began to break formation. One by one, the massive dreadnoughts were disabled, their shields collapsing under the pressure of the perfectly timed hits. The human forces, though outnumbered, moved swiftly, using the disarray to strike at the vulnerable vessels. In the space of minutes, 6 Crixian dreadnoughts had been taken offline, their weapons systems shattered, their shields rendered useless. The Crixian fleet began to panic. They had expected a victory parade, not a slaughter. The Crixians, who had prided themselves on their technological superiority, were now scrambling to understand what was happening. Their fleet, once so coordinated and disciplined, was now lost in confusion. Vask's team was executing a strategy the Crixians hadn't prepared for. Chaos through precision. But the Crixians weren't done yet. War leader Drax, aboard the Tyrant, the most formidable of their dreadnoughts, quickly ordered a counterattack. "Regroup," he commanded, his voice cold with anger. "Re-establish communication and fire on the human fleet." The 7th dreadnought, under Drax's direct command, had remained largely unaffected by the initial strikes. Drax's ship, with its own advanced systems, had been shielded from the worst of the attacks. In the face of the chaos, Drax knew exactly what to do. He ordered his ship to power down its weapons temporarily, refusing to react impulsively. Instead, he would regroup and counter the humans' attack with overwhelming force. But this too was a critical mistake. Vask's eyes narrowed as he saw Drax's ship momentarily power down its weapons. The Crixians had become reactive, defensive. They were learning, adapting, but their response was too slow. "Now," Vask said, his voice cold and calculating. He gave the signal for the second phase of the attack. Earth's forces struck again, targeting the weakest link in the Crixian fleet, their command ship, the Tyrant. With their communication systems hacked and their fleet in disarray, Drax could no longer coordinate an effective defense. The next few moments unfolded with terrifying speed as the Tyrant's shields, already compromised by Earth's previous strikes, finally buckled under the pressure. A devastating strike from Earth's forces tore through the tyrant's core, causing a massive explosion. The Crixians, disoriented and desperate, began to retreat, their once dominant fleet scattered in all directions. The human forces, emboldened by their unexpected success, pressed the advantage, driving the Crixians out of Earth's orbit. For a brief moment, Vask allowed himself a sigh of relief. But he knew this victory was only the beginning. The Crixians had been forced into a retreat, but they would adapt. They would learn. And the war was far from over. Yet for the first time since the invasion began, Earth had proven that it was no longer helpless in the face of superior technology. Humanity had turned the tide. And as the Crixians withdrew, one thing was certain: Earth would never be underestimated again. The Crixian fleet, once so confident in its strength, was now in disarray. The coordinated strikes from Earth's forces, aided by the stolen Crixian technology, had shattered their carefully laid plans. Earth had proven that its ingenuity could turn the tide, but the Crixians were not ones to accept defeat easily. War leader Drax, now fully aware that his communication network had been compromised, issued a chilling new directive: regroup, fortify, and eliminate humanity's technological advantage at any cost. The Crixians would not lose the war because of a simple hack. They would eradicate the human threat before it had a chance to grow. Drax's orders were swift and brutal. He ordered the Crixian fleet to fall back to a secure formation, with the Titan, the largest and most powerful of their Dreadnought-class ships, at the center. This colossal ship housed the entirety of the Crixian leadership, including Drax himself, and served as the command hub for the fleet. The Titan was a symbol of Crixian dominance, its massive weapons systems and near-impenetrable shields acting as both fortress and weapon of mass destruction. Drax knew that if the Titan fell, so would the Crixian war effort. Earth's forces would be emboldened, and victory would slip from his grasp. But Vask was already preparing his next move. With Earth's forces on the offensive, the Crixians' defensive systems were starting to fail. The quantum entanglement link that had once allowed them perfect coordination was now compromised, and the Crixian fleet had no time to recover before the next strike. Vask had no intention of playing a prolonged game of cat and mouse with Drax. Instead, he planned to take the fight directly to the heart of the Crixian command structure: the Titan. If Earth could eliminate the flagship, the Crixians would be thrown into chaos. Vask's eyes burned with cold determination as he studied the fleet's positions. They had learned much from their previous engagements, and now it was time to act. A full-scale assault would be risky, but it was the only way to ensure the Crixian fleet wouldn't have time to regroup and strike back. Vask made the call. "We go for the Titan," he said, his voice unwavering. "This is a suicide mission for most of us, but we'll make sure it counts." His team, loyal and battle-hardened, didn't hesitate. They knew the risks. The Crixian fleet was now fortified, but their defensive systems had been badly weakened. Vask knew that if they didn't strike now, the Crixians would rebuild their command structure and press the attack once more. The human fleet, now emboldened by their earlier victories, moved into position. Vask's plan was simple: infiltrate the heart of the Crixian formation, disable the Titan shield systems, and then strike at its central reactor. They would use their advantage in communication, hacked from the Crixian network, to synchronize their strike and minimize casualties. But even with the advantage of surprise, the mission was a gamble. They were taking on the Crixians' most powerful warship, a fortress capable of annihilating entire fleets with a single shot. The moment the human ships entered range, all hell broke loose. The Crixians, now aware that Earth had successfully infiltrated their defenses, retaliated with everything they had. The Titan unleashed its devastating weaponry, a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the dark expanse of space like fireworks. The human ships weaved and dodged, their shields buckling under the strain as they closed in on their target. The Crixians fought with ruthless precision, but Earth's forces continued to move with unexpected coordination. Vask's ship, the Intrepid, led the charge, weaving between incoming fire as they closed in on the Titan. The battle was chaotic. Human ships were being picked off one by one, but Vask's focus remained clear: The Titan had to be destroyed. The Crixians, in their desperation, focused all their attention on the human fleet, unable to predict the final strike Vask had in mind. As the Crixian fleet continued to retaliate, Vask made the call. It was time for the final assault. "Now or never," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We make our move on the reactor. Full power, all guns." The Intrepid surged forward, dodging fire, its engines glowing bright as it powered toward the heart of the Titan. The other human ships followed, each one braving the Crixian onslaught, their weapons primed and ready. As they neared the Titan, Vask's ship fired its last volley, targeting the Titan's shield generators. The first hit landed with deadly accuracy, ripping through the Crixian shields like paper. The Titan's defenses faltered, but there was still time for the Crixians to regroup. Drax, realizing that his flagship was in jeopardy, ordered his fleet to focus entirely on the human assault. But it was too late. Vask had already committed his final move. "We're going in," Vask said, his voice like steel. With a last, desperate push, the Intrepid broke through the defenses and made its way toward the Titan's core. The human fleet, using the confusion caused by the Intrepid's maneuver, moved in with precision, targeting the Crixian flagship's central reactor. Vask, knowing the risks, ordered a final suicide strike. They would attack with everything they had, knowing full well that the Titan's reactor would explode upon a direct hit. The strike was launched. The energy from Earth's weapons poured into the Titan's vulnerable reactor, the explosion erupting in a blinding flash of light. The Titan's core collapsed, sending a massive shockwave through the Crixian fleet. The heart of their command structure had been obliterated. The Crixians, disoriented and panicked, attempted to rally, but without their flagship, their fleet fell into chaos. The surviving Crixian ships began to retreat, their formations broken. For the first time in the war, Earth had struck a decisive blow. Vask stood in the command center of the Intrepid, watching the destruction unfold. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, but the victory felt bittersweet. The cost had been high. Many of Earth's finest ships had been destroyed, and countless lives had been lost. The Intrepid had barely made it through the assault, its hull riddled with damage from the retaliatory fire. The Crixian flagship, the Titan, was no more. The war had just shifted in Earth's favor. But Vask knew that the battle was far from over. The Crixians were resilient, and they would return. But for now, Earth had won a crucial victory. As the human forces regrouped, Vask stood, his eyes scanning the stars. The tide had turned. The Crixians might have underestimated humanity, but they would never make that mistake again. And neither would the rest of the galaxy. The battle had raged with a fury that left Earth's defenses stretched thin and the Crixian fleet reeling. As the Titan crumbled in a burst of energy and fire, the Crixians had faltered. Their fleet, once coordinated and lethal, now spun out of control. The loss of their flagship was catastrophic, and the human forces, emboldened by the success of Operation Quantum Strike, seized the advantage. The Crixians, disoriented and fractured, were forced into a retreat, their ships fleeing from the battlefield in every direction. The space that had once been filled with the terrifying presence of the Crixian fleet was now eerily quiet. Earth's victory was hard won, but it was undeniable. The Crixians had been humiliated, their command structure shattered and their fleet scattered. Major Torren Vask watched the retreat unfold from the command deck of the Intrepid, his heart still pounding with the adrenaline of the previous assault. The Crixians had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Yet, even in the victory, there was a nagging sense of unease. The Crixian retreat did not come without consequences. Earth had taken the upper hand, but the cost of the battle was staggering. The human fleet, though victorious, was battered and broken. The dreadnoughts, once symbols of power and invincibility, had sustained heavy damage. Shields were depleted, weapon systems damaged, and hulls scarred from the relentless barrage of Crixian fire. The human forces had pushed forward with everything they had, but it was clear that the toll of the war would be felt for years to come. Earth's military infrastructure had been severely weakened. Vital defense stations had been wiped out, and many of the most skilled officers had fallen in battle. The dreadnoughts, humanity's pride and hope, were now little more than hulking remains of their former selves. The human resistance had taken the fight to the Crixians, and the war had shifted, but at a great price. The leadership of Earth knew that despite the retreat of the Crixians, the war was not over. The Crixian fleet might be broken, but their retreat didn't signal the end of their threat. Earth was not yet safe. The cost of victory loomed over every decision. Vask and his team had bought humanity time, but what would come next? As the Crixian ships retreated into the dark expanse of space, Earth's forces began to regroup. Repair teams worked tirelessly to restore their damaged ships, while engineers frantically tried to patch together whatever they could from the wreckage. The victory over the Crixians was undoubtedly a turning point, but Earth's leadership had no illusions about the fragility of their position. The Crixians would not give up so easily. Vask had always known that war was not won in one battle. It was won over time, with each decision building on the next, and the next step was critical. "Gather the fleet," Vask ordered as the final remnants of the Crixian retreat dwindled on the monitors. "We're pressing forward. We secure the systems we still control, fortify our position. The Crixians won't be down for long." His voice was steady, but the weight of what had happened was still heavy in his chest. The emotional toll of losing so many good men and women was something that no victory could erase. In the chaos of the fight, Vask had seen comrades fall, had felt the sting of losing friends. People who had stood beside him through thick and thin. Their sacrifices would forever be etched into his mind. While Earth's leadership moved forward with the plan to secure key systems, Vask couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges ahead were far from finished. He understood the necessity of pressing the advantage. Earth couldn't afford to allow the Crixians time to regroup and strike back. But the knowledge that the galaxy had now taken notice of humanity's potential was a double-edged sword. There would be other powers out there, waiting, watching. The victory over the Crixians might have earned Earth its place at the table, but it would also make them a target for others. "Vask," came the voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Arlen. "We've got reports of the first Crixian ships entering the slipstream. They're retreating deeper into their territory. It's clear this battle is done. But what now? What happens when they regroup?" Vask stood in the center of the command room, staring at the holographic map of space. The Crixian fleet was scattered, but the retreat wasn't a surrender. Earth's forces might have broken their momentum, but the war with the Crixians was far from over. The Crixians might need time, but time wasn't something Earth had in abundance. The political situation was delicate, with questions about Earth's future hanging in the balance. The human race had proven its capacity for survival, but the price of that survival was still too steep to ignore. "Now," Vask said, his voice cold with determination, "we consolidate, we secure our systems, form new alliances, and prepare for the future. The Crixians will regroup, but so will we, and this time we won't just be defending, we'll be ready." As the next steps of the operation were put into motion, Vask stepped away from the command center and into the quiet of the corridor. The sounds of his boots echoed on the metal floors, a steady reminder of the weight he carried. The war had shifted in humanity's favor, but Vask understood that the challenges ahead were going to be even greater. The Crixians would learn from their mistakes, and there would be other powers waiting to fill the vacuum left by their retreat. Earth had fought and bled for this moment, but Vask knew that surviving this war was only the beginning. The cost of victory was steep, and the emotional toll was still raw, but he couldn't afford to dwell on that now. He had to lead. He had to prepare Earth for what came next. As he looked out at the stars, he knew that Earth's place in the galaxy had forever changed. Humanity was no longer a species that could be ignored. The Crixians had underestimated them, and now others would have to as well. The war with the Crixians had ended, and Earth had emerged victorious. An improbable triumph that had reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy. The once immense Crixian fleet had been shattered, their flagship obliterated, and their leadership thrown into chaos. For the first time in history, humanity had proved that it could stand against a superior force and come out on top. The Crixians, forced into retreat, now licked their wounds in the far reaches of their empire, but their defeat was not the final word in humanity's struggle. The victory was monumental, but the galaxy was vast, and there were many more challenges ahead. For Earth, the question of what came next was more complicated than anyone had expected. The military had proven itself capable of defying the odds, but now Earth had to decide how to navigate the diplomatic aftermath. The galaxy had been watching Earth's rise, and it had seen the potential for this small, once-ignored species to become a power in its own right. But with that power came the responsibility of how to wield it. The Crixian defeat had given Earth leverage, but the question was whether they should push for more or remain humble and avoid further conflict. Major Torren Vasque, once a battle-hardened leader of Earth's forces, found himself pulled into the heart of these political discussions. He had always been a strategist, focused on military victories and battlefield tactics, but now he was being asked to apply those skills in a new realm, diplomacy. Earth's newfound status in the galaxy meant that every decision, every move, would have consequences far beyond the borders of Earth's atmosphere. Vasque was no longer just a soldier. He had become a symbol of humanity's power, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. The government and military officials debated fiercely. Some saw this as an opportunity for Earth to assert itself on the galactic stage, to push for a position of leadership, and to establish a new order. They argued that Earth should use its victory to form alliances with other races, to secure its place in the galaxy as a force to be reckoned with. The dreadnoughts, the symbol of humanity's newfound strength, were a powerful bargaining chip. But they were also a reminder of the costs of war. There were those who feared that Earth's aggressive stance could provoke others into hostility. They warned against pushing for too much, too fast. Vasque found himself at the center of this debate, a reluctant participant in a conversation that he had never anticipated. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. His role had always been clear: lead humanity to victory and survive. But now he was tasked with navigating the complexities of peace and diplomacy. The discussions were exhausting, each faction pulling in different directions, each voice louder than the last. Vasque, usually the one giving orders, now found himself listening to others, forced to balance the military interests with the political and diplomatic needs of Earth. In one particularly tense meeting, Vasque sat across from Earth's top political leaders, his mind still reeling from the events of the war. He had always been the one making the hard calls, the one who led his team through the blood and fire of battle. Now he was expected to speak for Earth's future, to chart a course that would ensure humanity's survival and prosperity on a galactic scale. "We've earned this victory," Vasque said, his voice steady but firm. "But we cannot forget the cost. We lost too many good people to simply throw our weight around. Earth cannot be reckless. We can't afford to become what we've fought against." A high-ranking diplomat, Ambassador Yelena, interjected, her tone sharp. "You don't understand, Vasque. We have power now. The Crixians may have retreated, but there are other threats out there. We need to assert ourselves before others think we're weak, before they begin to see us as expendable again." Vasque leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We're not here to start another war. Our survival is what matters. We need to show the galaxy that we can be trusted, and that starts by making sure the Crixians never come back." The debate continued, but Vasque knew that the decisions made here would shape Earth's future. He could see both sides of the argument. The military had secured a victory, but that didn't guarantee peace. Earth had to make its place in the galaxy, but it also had to remember that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. In the aftermath of these discussions, Earth's leadership decided to act decisively. The next step was clear. Earth would take on a larger role in galactic defense, forming new alliances and ensuring that humanity was no longer seen as a fragile, vulnerable species. Earth's military forces would no longer be confined to their own world. They would be a presence in space, a powerful force capable of defending humanity from any threat. The dreadnoughts, though heavily damaged, would remain a symbol of Earth's strength, even as their repairs continued. Earth's forces would patrol key systems, keeping watch over the galaxy and establishing themselves as an active, powerful participant in galactic affairs. Humanity's new military capabilities would make them a critical part of any future defense efforts. However, there were critics. Some factions within Earth's government warned that humanity's newfound power came with risks. The dreadnoughts were a reminder of how far Earth had come, but they also reminded others of the violence and destruction that had been required to achieve this strength. There were concerns that Earth might be viewed as an aggressor, provoking tensions with neighboring species who might not view Earth's rise as a positive development. Basque knew that Earth's future was uncertain. As much as the victory had reshaped humanity's position, it had also opened new challenges. The Crixians had retreated, but there would be others watching, waiting. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's place within it was still fragile. Earth's strength was undeniable, but so were its vulnerabilities. Humanity had to learn how to navigate this new world, one where diplomacy and military power would need to work in tandem. As Vask sat in his quarters, staring out at the stars, he reflected on the cost of the war. The battle had been won, but the scars of the conflict would remain. The faces of those who had fallen, the sacrifices made, weighed heavily on his heart. The decisions made in these halls of power would shape the course of history, but Vask knew that peace, though hard won, would be even harder to maintain. He wasn't a politician, and he didn't want to be. But the future of Earth now rested in the balance, and Vask knew that no matter the role he played, he would carry the weight of humanity's survival with him always. As Earth stepped into a new era, it was clear. The lessons of the war would guide their future, and their place in the galaxy had changed forever. And for the first time, humanity was not just surviving, they were thriving. The war was over, but the cost of victory was still heavy in the air. Earth's place in the galaxy had changed forever. From a small, overlooked planet to a formidable power capable of challenging the mightiest of empires. The destruction of the Titan, the Crixian flagship, had proven humanity's capability. Its ability to face overwhelming odds and emerge victorious. Yet, as the dust settled and Earth's military forces regrouped, Captain Torren Vask knew that with this newfound power came a responsibility that would shape humanity's future. The Crixians were gone, driven into retreat, their fleet shattered and their leadership in disarray. But Vask couldn't shake the memories of the battle. The explosions, the screams, the silence that followed. The victory, though monumental, had come at a price that no celebration could erase. The faces of his fallen comrades, those who had given their lives for Earth's survival, haunted him. As the human fleet returned to Earth's orbit, the war's aftermath settled over them like a heavy fog. The surviving dreadnoughts were battered, their hulls scarred by battle, and Earth's military infrastructure had been severely weakened. Despite their victory, humanity had paid a heavy toll. The dreadnoughts, their most powerful ships, were no longer the invincible symbols of Earth's might they once were. Repair crews worked tirelessly to restore them, but some ships would never be the same again. Many of the finest soldiers, pilots, and officers had fallen in the war, their sacrifices written into the history of Earth's fight for survival. Bask sat in the quiet of his quarters, the weight of the last few weeks pressing on him. He pulled up the footage from the war, the faces of the men and women who had stood by him, fought by his side, and ultimately given everything for the cause. The faces flickered on the screen. Familiar faces that had once laughed, strategized, and fought alongside him. They were gone now, their bodies scattered across distant planets, their names etched into memorials that would never truly bring them back. His heart ached for each of them, the losses that could never be undone. One face lingered longer than the rest, his closest friend, Lieutenant Arlen. The last time they had spoken, Arlen had been on the Intrepid, leading the charge against the Crixian dreadnoughts. Arlen's final words had been simple. "We'll make it, Vask. We always do." Vask had clung to those words in the chaos, but now, looking at the empty seat next to him, he knew that Arlen would never return. No one would. The soldiers, the officers, the civilians, they had all paid a price. But victory had been achieved. Earth had prevailed, and the Crixians had been forced to retreat. Vask stood from his chair, walking slowly to the window and staring out at the stars. The galaxy, once so vast and indifferent, now seemed different. Earth's place within it had been solidified, but it was a position that carried weight. Earth could never again afford to be seen as weak or expendable. They had proven their strength, but now the question was how to wield it. Vask knew that peace was fragile. The Crixians might have retreated, but their defeat didn't signal the end of humanity's struggle. Other empires, other forces would inevitably rise, and Earth's position would be tested again. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was still a newcomer. The war with the Crixians might have ended, but the consequences of that victory were just beginning to unfold. The human forces began to rebuild, establishing new alliances with former adversaries and strengthening their defenses. Earth's military had a place in the galactic order now, a role to play in the defense of not just their world, but the wider galaxy. Earth's dreadnoughts remained symbols of that strength, their very presence a reminder that humanity could stand against the most powerful forces in the universe. But with that strength came the responsibility to use it wisely, to navigate the delicate balance between asserting their power and maintaining peace. As Vask watched the rebuilding efforts unfold, he couldn't help but reflect on the lessons of the war. It hadn't been brute strength that had won the battle. It had been humanity's adaptability, its ability to learn and grow from the mistakes of the past. The Crixians had underestimated humanity's potential, and that had been their downfall. But now, humanity would have to do more than survive. It would have to adapt again. The lessons learned in battle would have to be applied to the delicate task of peacekeeping. The same ingenuity that had driven Earth's victory would be needed to navigate the complexities of galactic diplomacy and defense. Vask's role had shifted from military strategist to political leader. No longer just a soldier, he was now a symbol of Earth's power, a leader who would guide humanity into its next chapter. The emotional toll of the war weighed heavily on him, but Vask knew that this was his new reality. His decisions, his actions, would shape Earth's future. The legacy of their victory would live on, but the true test was yet to come. For now, Vask stood at the precipice of a new era, one where Earth was no longer the underdog, but a force to be reckoned with. He had led humanity to victory, but the battle for their place in the galaxy had only just begun. The Crixians had learned the hard way that Earth was not to be underestimated, and now humanity would have to prove that it could be trusted with the power it had earned. Vask took a deep breath, staring at the stars outside his window. There was no going back now. The road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready. Earth had faced its darkest hour, and now they would step into the light. Humanity's future was in their hands, and they would not falter. How do you think humanity should navigate its place in the galaxy? Should they push for more dominance, or focus on diplomacy and alliances? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this thrilling HFY story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button